I have scripted and re-scripted this video so many times it's getting tough to count, but now I think I'm about ready to give it my best shot yet. You see, drum recording is one of those things that people have a big mental block about, and that's due to the relatively high barrier of entry. There's a financial investment you have to consider, which is buying your own drums and your own gear, or using someone else's drums and someone else's gear. But there's also a mental investment to make as well. You gotta train, you gotta, trial and error your way through, you gotta research, and you gotta get yourself to the point where you can say, I'm a drum engineer, I can record real drums on your record. This has led to the erroneous belief that real drums on records is a domain best left to the professionals, whoever they may be. Well, over the course of this upcoming series, I really hope to disprove that notion and show you that you can be a drum engineer too. You just gotta put the work in, that's all. So today I'm going to give you a very, very powerful tool that will save you thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of headache when you next make your record. This is your field guide to recording drums part 1, pre-production. Hello there everyone, my name is Jake and I'm the Chief Engineer and Producer here at Sawmill Recordings, and today I'd like you to consider the essence of pre-production. What is it? Why do we do it? How does it help? How do we do it? Very basic questions, but ones that don't have a very straightforward answer. The way I like to define pre-production is a temporary sacrifice of the glitz and glamour and fun, really, of the recording process in order to attend directly to what absolutely has to go right in order for you to make a pro-level record. This means a lot of pen pushing, organization, logistics, practicing, setup, and deciding. Yet the people who need the production the most are the ones that consistently overlook it. This is because the slow, methodical work required to actually do pre-production is a total buzzkill to most young creative types, and believe me, I completely understand. It is a direct wet blanket over that spark, that fire of inspiration that you guys have that demands to be acted on like right now or else it's gonna go out. For this reason, many artists decide to hire a producer. The less of that work recurs to the artist and the more of it can be pawned off on one person whose responsibility it is to do that work, the better, the more creativity can flow. That's a good thing. The problem comes when artists decide that they want to save a quick buck and self-produce. What happens there is you lose out on the outside perspective that a producer can give you, but you also lose out on the pre-production process if you don't know to do it. It's gotten to the point now where I can sit down and listen to an album that I know was self-produced and see almost all of the holes where some pre-production would have been great. Not only in talking to the artist, but also in the music itself. So with that, I've come up with 5 steps to get you started on the process. These aren't the only 5 things that you have to do pre-production. There's obviously a whole lot more technical stuff, but these are the 5 most important things that will get you started on the road. Step 1, decide what sound you're trying to create and make sure it's complementary to the style. Imagine a mixer with 5 faders in front of you. Each one is at 12 o'clock. If you turn it less, that factor goes less. If you turn it more, that factor goes more. Those faders are labeled injury, tension, spread, light, and luster. Or rather, live versus dead, tight versus loose, wide versus narrow, bright versus dark, and sparkly versus dull. By balancing these faders, you can make any drum sound you've ever heard, and that's an incredibly powerful mental tool. As we'll see later, different factors will be introduced that will change that vision, and you'll eventually need to look up again and reorient with that style that you're shooting for. I suppose there'd be more
guidelines than actual rules.
Step 2, dress the drums and dress the drummer. Just as you dress for occasions according to circumstances and expectations, this is where you get the drum set sounding exactly as you want it to in context. The most crucial element for doing this is listening to how your drummer and the drum set you've given him sound when they're put together. For instance, you wouldn't want to make a intimate jazz trio record with a drum set sounding like this. But likewise, you wouldn't want to make a rock record sounding like this. It's technically right. I mean, I'm playing the kick drum on 1 and 3 and the snare drum on 2 and 4 and keeping even eighth notes on the hi-hat, but it's not going to work on the record. Where's the spunk? Where's the attitude? It's a rock record. I'll tell you where it's gone. It's disappeared into nothingness because the instrument wasn't played right. Here's how it should sound. What I'm getting at is this. The decisions you make about implements, cymbals, drums, heads, tuning, and even sticks are all going to have a marked effect on the sound when they're combined with a drummer's individual style and skill level. This conversation has to be had before you even think about going into a studio. If you want a drummer to play his rim knocks more consistently or as a better fit for a song, you'd better tell him to aim for the same point on the stick. I mean, listen to the difference here. High better or low better? Well, it kind of depends on the song, but that has to be consistent and you need to have that conversation with your drummer beforehand. Similarly, if you want a big washy ride sound, you should ask your drummer to bring in a big washy ride, or better yet, commandeer one from somewhere if you aren't happy with the sound of his heavy dry ride that he always brings to practice. You may also want a snare that sounds more like a timbale than a snare. Just have him hit a few of them and pick which one you like best, etc, etc. I think you get the point now. Unfortunately though, every change you make at this stage is going to have a noticeably different outcome, as I said before. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse. The reason this is because you're dealing with a human element on an acoustic instrument. Humans are imperfect and acoustic instruments are primitive and they sound the way they're made and the way they're prepared. It's no trivial feat to control all of these factors, but it does get easier with experience. Now write all of this down and keep coming back to it in future, but then grab some staff paper because it's time for step 3, make charts. This is where you have to ask the drummer possibly one of the questions that drummers hate getting the most. What exactly did you play there? Don't get me wrong, we aren't trying to do a full transcription and get the drummer to play it perfectly every time. That's not what we're after here. We need, at minimum, something that conveys the most essential elements of the song. 1, the form of the song. How many bars are in the verses, choruses, time signature changes, and so on. 2, where and what the stops and unison figures, also in the shots, are. 3, whether those stops are sustained or choked. And finally 4, stylistic stuff like dynamics and what you're keeping time on. The purpose of this is to avoid major guesswork and trivial setbacks on the day of recording. If the songwriter, for whatever reason, can't make it to the session because life gets in the way, you should be able to maximize your time with the people that can make it. The band doesn't have to ask how many times does this riff go, or do we play this figure every time in the solo section. They just look at the paper and know. I personally prefer big band style charts, but I'm no stranger to Nashville numbers or even the old school whiteboard or massive sticky note method. Just have something concrete that illustrates all of those 4 points. Functionally, the same thing is achieved by having all the musicians just memorize the song in the first place, but you can't really trust musicians to do this. They have so much on their mind and they're all creative and wishy-washy anyway. We need to kind of focus that and channel that creativity to order it a little bit. For instance, if you practice a song with a hard stop at rehearsal or a Vegas ending, but you're feeling more of a fade out in the studio, all you have to do is make a couple of simple edits to a piece of paper. That's it. You made the edit, you can be creative, but you didn't get carried away with the song, and that is the important thing. I know better than most the temptation to bring in a massive drum set, even comically massive like this one, into the studio for recording, but the more elements you have on your kit, the more there is to go wrong, and as we already established, that's a bad thing. Perfect example of this, having 2 kick drums. It looks great and feels even better to play. But it's just a liability. There's phase cancellation issues to be concerned about, and if you don't have the best combination of drums, Tuning stability is also a huge issue too. Triggers obviously make this point a bit moot, but that's a subject for another video. I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole right now. This point is especially relevant if you're trying to make hard rock or heavy metal. You are shooting for a larger than life and very consistent sound, so the better the setup and the more gravity can work to your advantage, the better. The legs should be at a 90-degree angle or greater to the pedal so they can balance better while playing the kick drum with one or both feet. The snare should be fairly high to compensate for the sitting position and be pretty flat for rimshot consistency. Tom should also be fairly flat with a slight angle towards the drum. Don't go any more than 45 degrees though, we need power here, not a tap. I recommend putting your pedals and the hi-hat stand down first in the spot where the drummer's feet naturally fall, then building the kit around that. If they play double kick, I recommend slave pedal preference on the left foot, as they'll probably use it a little more than the hi-hat pedal. For other styles of music, it's less important. Just make sure the drummer is comfortable and there's a decent distance between the hi-hat and the snare. Simon Phillips can have his hi-hat very low and close to the snare because he has excellent dynamic control. You don't want that hi-hat bleeding into the snare mic any more than it already does. So let's just maximize that a bit. Step 5. Set expectations. If you're new at recording music, then a common question that gets brought up is, what standard should I hold myself to, and what can I expect when I'm in the studio? There are multiple correct answers to this, but whatever that answer may be, it should be communicated well in advance, especially if you're working with session players. There's 3 possible scenarios here. First, you're a band member recording your own music. Second, you're a session player that's recording music that's been sent to you in advance. And finally, there's a session player that's going in blind in the case of a demo session or in the case of an artist that likes to work particularly quickly. As someone doing pre-production for drums or even a whole act, you need to be absolutely on top of what kind of session your artist or session player is walking into. Sure, a total pro can handle scenario 3, but he might not be too pleased with you if he's expecting scenario 2 and you're giving him scenario 3 with a totally different song. It's a totally different kind of mental headspace prep work that they have to do in order to just spontaneously create like that versus having some time to sit down and study the music. It's also important for you to let your session players know if your time budget has space for punch-ins or do-overs for alternate fills and stuff, because that's going to affect what kind of fills they choose to play on your song. If you have time, they will probably run a few different ideas past you, and I stress that you let them do this because they may well come up with something that you like better. If you're working from scenario 1, then you're working from a very comfortable place because you get to select when you record. You're not beholden to anyone else's time budget. In this situation, I would highly recommend being able to play the song front to back 3 times as close to perfectly as you possibly can. That doesn't necessarily mean that you'll run it top to bottom in the studio. The song might not call for that, but that's just the standard preparedness that you should be pretty much shooting for. It sounds pretty easy, just 3 times, but trust me, it's not. Every little nuance of this song, dynamic changes, you can't miss a single thing at all, and 3 times over. Every time you mess up, you start back at 1. It is a very high standard. I even know some people who do more than that, like 6 or even 10, but 3 times is enough for the average session. And finally, a word to the players. Don't get complacent. Modern engineers, yes, do have a lot of tools at their disposal to clean up and fix a mediocre performance. However, these tools are very time consuming to use, and they have a nasty habit of censoring the human feel out of a song if applied too liberally. So it's better to train to a standard where these tools aren't necessarily required and it's a choice for the engineer rather than the first step in the process of mixing. It's good both for your reputation and their budget. So mutually beneficial, really. And that's that. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you got something out of it. I've been really blown away by the growth that my channel's been seeing, so just please keep liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing it all around. Really helps my channel a lot, really goes a long way. You can also check out my heavy metal band Vetsinus in the description down below. We just released a new single and we used all of these pre-production schools of thought on it. We're really proud of it, and we've got an album waiting in the wings, and we're so excited to play it, and we're so excited to release it, so stay tuned for that. I also have a blog which is also in the description just below the Vetsinus link, and you can go there, you can read what I have to say about music and stuff, and you can even book a session with me if you really wanted to. It's my studio's website, it's all there for you to see. Now let's get you making music.